Hello and welcome to what I hope will be the first in a series of videos of vintage car spotter's guides. That is to say, guides to quickly identify various vintage cars based on an exterior view and possibly a quick look at the interior. This guide will be based on the idea that the car you're looking at is completely factory stock and has not been restored with incorrect parts or aftermarket parts or painted a non-standard color. This video will cover the Chevrolet Corvette C1 generation, which is collector's shorthand for the first generation of Corvette from 1953 to 1962. For the purposes of organizing this video, I am separating the C1 Corvette into several specific groups. The 1953 to 1955 early cars, the 1956 to 1957 mid-year cars, the later 1958 to 1960 quad headlight cars, and finally the 1961 and 1962 camtail cars. First year 1953 Corvettes are all pretty much identical. Every single one of them is polo white with a red interior. In fact, the only differences between any of the 300 first cars are that the first 25 of them carried a slightly different hubcap style, and there were two official options: a heater and a radio. 1954 Corvettes are almost identical to 1953 Corvettes. However, there are a couple of notable differences. One is the inclusion of three new paint colors: Sportsman Red, Pennant Blue, and Black. No fancy name, just black. If you see a 53 to 55 Corvette in black, it is automatically a 1954. Although it's pretty unlikely to see one considering they only built 4 of them in that color. In fact, over 3,200 of the over 3,600 Corvettes made in 1954 were still polo white with red interior, exactly like 1953. In the case of these cars, there is only one surefire way to tell a 53 from a 54, and that's to look at the convertible top. All 53 Corvettes had black convertible tops. All 54 Corvettes had beige convertible tops, regardless of exterior color. The few available paint colors were changed up a bit for 1955. The most popular color was still polo white with red interior. Pennant blue was also carried over unchanged. Sportsman red was replaced by gypsy red, a slightly more orangish hue, although it's very difficult to tell the two colors apart unless you're looking at them side by side. Black was dropped, and 2 new paint colors were added for 55. Corvette Copper and Harvest Gold, a very popular color which featured a very unusual looking green convertible top. But the biggest news for 1955 was the introduction of the Chevrolet small block V8. Although officially an option on the 55 Corvette, nearly all 55 Corvettes were equipped with the V8. The exact breakdown of 6-cylinder versus V8 production isn't exactly known, but it's thought as few as 6 cars might have actually had the 6-cylinder that year. It's easy to tell if the car is equipped with a V8 from the outside. Look at the Chevrolet script on the front fenders. As you can see, 53 and 54 script was fairly straightforward. But on 55 cars with the V8 engine, you'll notice the V in Chevrolet is a great big gold one. That's to indicate the V8, making it pretty easy to isolate a 55 at a glance. Corvette was completely redesigned for 1956, as you can see, and 1957s were actually nearly identical. It's pretty tricky to tell a 56 from a 57 Corvette. You can look for certain rare 1957 options, such as the 4-speed manual transmission. If you glance at the shift pattern on the shifter bezel and you see 4 gear indicators, that would mean the car is a 57. However, the 4-speed was a late-year introduction and relatively few cars had it. The same also goes for the fuel injection option. It was new for 57, so if you see a badge that says fuel injection on the fenders, that also means a 57. But again, the majority of 57 cars won't have this. The best surefire way to tell a 56 from a 57 is to look at the rear view mirror. 1957 cars had a nut on the back that required adjustment with a wrench in order to adjust the mirror. 56s had a slightly different base to the mirror that didn't have this nut. There are some other very minor differences, like the shape of the pinholes for the retaining clips for the removable hardtop, but that's way too technical for a spotter's guide, so we'll just overlook that. Complicating things somewhat is the fact that all 56 colors were carried over to 57, although there was one new color for 1957, Inca Silver, which was only on 65 cars. So to reiterate, unless you see obvious tells like fuel injection, a 4-speed, or a rare Inca Silver paint color, you have to look at the rearview mirror to tell the 2 years apart. 1958 to 1960 Corvettes carried a number of styling revisions, most notably quad headlights. 1958s are fairly easy to identify. One feature that sets them apart are these simulated louvers in the hood, which gives the hood a sort of washboard appearance. Another are 2 chrome strips that run the length of the trunk lid. These features were not very popular and both were eliminated for 1959. 1959 and 1960 cars are nearly identical, although there were some differing color options that I don't really want to get into. Possibly the easiest way to tell the 2 years apart is to look at the pleating on the seats. 1959 seats have horizontal pleats. 1960 seats have vertical pleats. That's one surefire way to tell the 2 years apart. Corvettes were restyled for 1961. The most notable change was the new cam tail with the 4 round taillights, which went on to become a Corvette trademark. The front was also restyled, with a single horizontal bar across the grille with mesh behind it, replacing the earlier free-floating sort of toothy design. The single round nose emblem was also replaced with a much smaller emblem with Corvette lettering beneath it. 1962 looked much the same as 1961. Although one notable difference is it was no longer possible to get a two-tone Corvette. The famous C1 two-tone Coves, which had been offered as an option since 1956, were no longer available. All cars were single-tone. Also, the side trim was somewhat changed. Gone were the horizontal strakes that came off the side trim. It was replaced with a much simpler, simulated vent. Hopefully this video has given you a quick primer on how to identify 1953 to 1962 Corvettes. I hope to provide similar such videos in the future. Until then, happy spotting.